Hello, and welcome to Marketplace with Charles, brought to you by Art of Skincare, the company that brings out the beauty in you. I am Charles Ngobeni. On Marketplace, we aim to empower, encourage, and equip you with the right tools needed to move closer to achieving your entrepreneurial dreams. Each week, we bring you insights from experts in different fields of business, men and women of faith, and ordinary people from all walks of life. Coming up on today's show, we explore the subject of taxation. Everything that you should know about taxation as a business person. We speak to an accountant that has been practicing as more than just an accountant, but also as a tax practitioner on behalf of myriads of clients that get satisfaction from the services of his company. His company, AV Accounting Services. Welcome, Mr. Addrian Vermaak, also known as Addy, to your home. An expert in the industry, Addrian has spent years in the business and personal financial accounting environment and carries loads of experience in this area. Stay with us for some valuable knowledge. The subject of taxation is one that sends chills of fear in many of people's minds who believe that the taxation is out to get them. But what exactly does this taxation speak to? And why are you as an individual or as a business expected to have your tax affairs in order? Addrian, thank you for joining us and welcome to Marketplace with me, Charles, today.
Thank you, Charles, and welcome to your viewers as well.
Will you kindly explain to our viewers about yourself and your company and what you do?
Thank you, Charles. Yes, my name is Addrian Vermaak. I've been in practice for about 17 years now. Our company's name is AV Accounting Services, and we're based in Centurion. Yes. And we cater largely to the SME market, providing accounting, taxation, and bookkeeping services.
Mm-hmm. Taxation is not just a modern business terminology, and neither has it been instituted by the South African Revenue Services, what we normally call as SARS. You know, we read about it from the Bible.
Correct, yeah.
From the Old Testament as well, even from the New Testament. We normally say, give Caesar what belongs to Caesar. I think that's what Jesus said.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
In your own words, can you define taxation? What taxation
of course.
really is?
Taxation is funds or money collected by a government from its economically active citizens, businesses and individuals alike, to fund things like healthcare, the judicial system being the police, prisons, courts, infrastructure build, and of course looking after our national government debt.
Mm-hmm. And in other words, it's collected by the government.
Correct, yeah.
For the people.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. The taxes are used for the benefit of the citizens of a country.
And we hear a lot of sometimes maybe of the tax being misused or abused.
Yes, yeah, that's a problem.
Yes. Is there any recourse to that?
I'm afraid not, no. We are all required and legislated to pay our share.
Whether it is being abused or misused or mishandled, correct, we still have a liability.
Yes, yeah. Unfortunately, we can't escape that liability because the powers that be are possibly handling the money incorrectly.
Mm-hmm. And briefly, who is expected to pay tax?
Any economically active citizen or business is required to register for income tax, and then we then also look at the various classes of taxes, which I think we'll get into just now. So it's as soon as you're economically active, earning a salary, running a business, you are required to pay income tax.
Is there a threshold to that?
Yes. For individuals, we're looking at a threshold of around about for the 2018 year. For employees under the age of 65 years old, it's just over 75,000 Rand. So as soon as you earn under that bracket, you then won't have to pay income tax. And what SARS also has is it's got various rebate structures in place for different age groups as well.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And why are individuals and business expected to pay this tax?
Well, government needs funds to be able to provide services to its citizens.
Yes.
So yes, yeah, you got to pay. Unfortunately.
I wish I was the government and collecting this money, then I wouldn't have to work.
Yeah.
that would be quite interesting for me.
Yeah.
Thank you for staying with us. We will continue our conversation with my guest, Mr. Addrian Vermaak, also known as Addy, after the break. Welcome back. You are watching Marketplace with me, Charles Ngobeni. Adrian,
Yes, Charles.
Can we now shift our focus and talk more on business taxation?
Yes.
And if possible, we'll look at the individual and personal tax later. I hope we'll have time for that.
Sure.
But for now, I want us to discuss the business taxation. What are the types of business tax that you know of or that are there?
Thank you, Charles. Right, first of all, we start off with normal income tax, which is based on the profits of a company.
Yes.
So all companies that make a profit have to pay income tax, and then SARS collects that through the means of provisional tax, which is payable twice a year. Estimates are done then every 6 months to see what your profit situation is like, and you will then pay tax based on that portion.
Is that the same as pay as you earn?
No. Income tax is for companies.
Oh, it's for companies?
Yes, so it's a flat rate of 28%, whereas pay as you earn or individual tax is based on tiered rates. So you start from a very, very low rate for individuals going up, but we'll chat about that just now. Yeah.
Okay.
So right, so that's income tax side of things, the easy tax. Then the second big form of taxation for the commissioner is value-added tax, or we call it VAT, shortened, abbreviated to VAT. Now, any entity that whose turnover is in excess of R1 million in a year is obliged to register for VAT. There are certain exemptions, which we'll talk about a little bit later as well. Now, VAT is a very, very efficient form of revenue collection because it collects from the consumer. So you selling a product for 100 Rand, you have to add on your VAT of 14 Rand.
Yes.
114 Rand is then your selling price as the business. SARS then allows you to also then deduct your input VAT, which is the VAT portion that you paid when you bought those goods or services on sale. VAT is a very, very big revenue source for the commissioner. Then we start looking at the payroll taxes that every company has to have in place as soon as it has employees.
Yes.
So that would be, as we spoke about just now, it would be pay as you earn, UIF, which is the Unemployment Insurance Fund, and SDL, which is the Skills Development Levy. Okay. Now, to register for SDL, as soon as your payroll in a year exceeds 500,000 Rand, so in other words, what you pay your staff exceeds 500,000 Rand in a year, you then have to pay over with your pay-as-you-earn return that SDL levy of 1% based on total payroll. Now, it's interesting to see what the government has done with those revenue sources.
Yes.
As we know, pay-as-you-earn is dead straightforward personal income tax. Now, UIF is the Unemployment Insurance Fund, which then administers if somebody has lost their work, retrenched, maternity leave, they can then go to the Unemployment Insurance Fund or UIF fund and then claim benefits from that. Now, I think one of the most exciting levies that have come in a long time has been the Skills Development Levy, or the SDL. SDL is collected. It then goes to the different SETAs, which is the Sectoral Educational Training Authorities. The SETAs then administer those funds and pays out to businesses that put their staff on recognised training programs. So for development of our working population, I really think it's really, really fantastic. For example, we are members of FACET, which is the Financial Accounting Sectoral Educational Training Authority. So it then looks after guys who are doing the articles or to people who are training in the financial services field.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. So then we also then look at customs and excise duties.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a nasty one. Any imports that come into the country will have, most will have a customs levy or duties levied on those goods and services plus VAT, right? So now that is typically done to look after our local production. Because as we know, we can get an awful lot of products imported relatively cheaply, but then SARS says, but hang on, we're going to then charge you a customs duty based on this stuff to bring your pricing in line with our country's pricing.
Yes.
Okay. And customs duty is administered by customs at all our border posts and at all our international airports as well. So as soon as a company comes in, it has to be declared, the duty is calculated, and it's paid over before those goods are released. Another form of taxation that we look at is dividends withholding tax, or the old STC, which changed about 2, 3, 4 years ago. Now that is now, should the company wish to pay out a dividend to its shareholders, it's a further tax. So firstly, the company will pay its 28% normal income tax or provisional tax, plus then a further 20% on that distribution that has been declared. So it's quite a bit.
It's a lot. It's a lot. And understand that there's another taxation. I'm not too sure if I'm right or wrong. When you buy a car, that has to do with the environment.
Oh yes, the
what is
CO2
it?
tax.
CO2 tax.
Yeah, the carbon dioxide tax.
Yes.
Yeah. Now the way that works is that every manufacturer has to specify what its vehicle's fuel consumption is, and then as we know, out of the exhaust pipe comes certain CO2 products that are not burnt up, and based on that level of based on those levels of CO2 emissions, a levy or a tax is implemented once off on the purchase of that vehicle. Yeah.
So the better the car, the less tax you pay, I suppose.
Well, if the fuel consumption is better, then yes, yeah. We look at often at the small diesel cars have no fuel have no CO2 tax on them whatsoever because the fuel consumption is under a certain limit.
Good.
Yeah, which helps us all.
So it helps to buy a great car.
Buy smart.
Buy smart.
Yeah. Gas guzzlers now.
Buy smart and then pay less tax.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And then of course we then look at more national levies or national taxes, which would be things like the fuel levy, which is implemented by Treasury on a yearly basis, and that is then collected, and those funds then go to the RAF or the Road Accident Fund, which is then used to help people who have been in accidents who have got hurt.
They still owe me a lot.
I'm sure they do. Actually, they owe a lot of people a lot.
I once had a car accident and my hand and my feet were damaged. And
really? Still waiting?
I'm still waiting, and hopefully they'll pay soon.
Let's hope so. I hope so for your sake, sure.
Because I learned they were bankrupt at one stage, and sometimes this year.
I think they sort of, most of the time they're bankrupt.
Yeah,
it's a problem.
Oh, great, man. But then I also understand there's a secondary tax. If you've got business out of the country, you sell goods, and
that would normally
the main companies here in the country. And how does that work?
That's quite a tricky tax. That's to do with international taxes.
Yes.
And one is recommended, if you're in that situation, to approach your tax practitioner or your tax advisor to see how you can then structure your affairs as efficiently as possible. For example, if you're a foreigner doing business in this country and you earn interest or royalties, there's a withholding tax immediately before those funds can be paid out to you, which then has to go through various channels. It's very, very complicated, it's very, very in-depth, and it's very, very case-specific.
No, that's a real mouthful. It's a lot of tax issues.
Yes. Yeah.
But now, how does the company know which tax to pay and which tax not to pay?
Yes. What I would recommend any company to do is to approach a registered accountant and or / tax practitioner. I think it's very, very important, because then he can then advise that business owner exactly what he should register for and how much he needs to pay. But on the whole, excuse me, on the whole, any company has to be registered for income tax. That we all know.
Yeah.
If it has employees, it has to be registered for pay as you earn.
And UIF.
In UIF, and sometimes STL if the payroll is over 500,000 Rand a year. Then it has to look at, is its annual turnover in excess of 1 million Rand?
Yes.
Then VAT kicks in. A topic which we haven't covered yet is the Office of the Compensation Commissioner, or the Workmen's Compensation Fund.
Yes.
Very, very important. Now what that does is it's a yearly submission to the Compensation Commissioner, and it's based on your payroll subject to certain limits. Now those funds are used to help, that then goes into a central fund, and those funds are then used to help a company, to help an employee that has got hurt on duty and that has received medical assistance, and those fees have to be paid. So every employer who has staff also has to register for workmen's compensation, which I think is actually a very, very good thing. It then makes sure that people who might not always be able to have access to good medical care will have it.
No, it's an excellent thing to have.
Yeah.
And I'll encourage all businesses to have that.
Very important.
You know.
Yes.
I mean, if one of your employees is banned on duty.
That's right.
You know, if you are sued.
Precisely.
That can take you out of business.
It can take you out of business, absolutely.
You know, and if you are covered by such taxation, then you don't have anything to worry. You simply have to refer your employees to the right department and lodge their claim, and then they are paid in full.
Yes, yeah.
And in fact, I understand they also pay for all the hospital fees and any other claim after that.
Doctors, X-rays, physiotherapists.
And not just ordinary doctors, experts in
Absolutely. Our specialists as well are also covered. And I would really, really encourage all business owners to get the workmen's compensation in place and to make sure that it's correct.
That's great. But I understand that when you look at VAT, there are some industries that are exempted.
Correct. Yeah.
You know, like educational services. I'm not too sure, maybe churches.
Churches, yes, because they're public benefits.
Yes, and taxis.
Any public road or rail transport services, yes. So it's
how true is that, and how does it work?
Okay, so what happens is that Treasury specifies what industries, what classifications are exempt from VAT. Okay, so as you mentioned, road and rail transport. It would be churches, schools, educational services.
Yeah.
Then we look at zero-rated in enterprise. And residential accommodation as well.
Oh, residential accommodation.
Yeah, if you are letting out residential accommodation, you are exempt from VAT registration. You don't have to charge VAT or pay VAT over. Now, it's important to make a distinction between exempt and zero-rated. Zero-rated would be industries like filling stations. Okay.
On the fuel side.
On the fuel only, yes. Yeah. It would be on basic foodstuffs: brown bread, mealie meal, samp, maize, Pilchers-Intons, a couple of other classifications that then fall into that as well.
Yeah.
Now, if you are exempt, you cannot claim your input VAT on the purchases. If you're zero-rated, like a filling station, you can claim your input VAT on your purchases.
Okay.
Yeah. Residential accommodation is exempt, so you cannot claim any input VAT on your purchases that you've made for that enterprise at all.
Oh, great. After a break, we wrap our episode on taxation with my guest, Adi. Stay with us.
Greetings, Pastor Abraham S. Raja. I want to invite you to join our Bible School, KBSM. Why us? First of all, our material is available all over the world. Our YouTube clips contain all of our teachings. We are a fully correspondence Bible school, and our first year is absolutely free. And I want you to know that our 5th year program permits you to be eligible for a doctorate in divinity at the Lighthouse Seminary in the United States of America. So why waste any further time? Join us today. Our information is on the screen.
Welcome back to Marketplace with Charles. Before the break, we have been discussing about the VAT issues and the exemption and all the like. In a general sense, can you go a little bit deeper into that?
Okay. If we look at tax exemption, we basically got two fields. We either look at tax exemption from income tax point of view or from a VAT point of view. Now, from an income tax point of view, the tax exemption would apply to a duly registered public benefit organization that can then issue a Section 18A certificate for donations. Sorry, a Section 18A certificate, which would be, let's say, for example, you make a donation to the SPCA. They then produce a Section 18A certificate, which you can actually use for a tax deduction for yourself, but the organization itself is not taxable on its income. And it's extremely important for any charitable organization to then follow those correct steps. Schools, churches, all of those kind of institutions that receive funds to make sure that their tax exempt status is in place and is correct.
We spoke about the residential accommodation before the break.
Yes.
You know, to what extent does this go?
Now, this is important now because we've established that residential accommodation is exempt from a VAT point of view.
Yes.
But it's important to look at how residential accommodation is treated from an income tax point of view. Now, any entity, any organization, juristic entity that carries on any trade, and in this case providing residential accommodation is a trade, has to declare those net profits in their annual returns to SARS.
So it's exempted from VAT?
Correct, but not from income tax.
But not from income tax?
Correct, no. No. Now what happens in that situation is you would look at your total rental income received, less allowable expenditure, which would be the bond interest if a bond has been taken out, repairs and maintenance, levies, security. And that net figure is then declared in that individual or company's tax returns on a yearly basis. It's important also to structure one's affairs correctly when it does come to renting out residential accommodation, because it doesn't help you having the bond in the company's name, but you as the individual are renting the property out, because you can't then claim that deduction for the bond interest portion. And once again, it's then a good idea to go and see your advisor and say, right, how should we structure my affairs efficiently and correctly?
So basically, we need an expert in this field.
It's highly recommended. It's highly recommended, yes. Yeah.
Highly recommended, or we definitely need one?
Let's go with definitely need one.
You know, viewers out there, the reason why I'm saying we definitely need an expert in this field is because sometimes our tax issues are just in a mess. You know, you try to access funds from the bank, and your tax situation is messy, and you can't get any assistance from the banks. You know, it can be a tricky situation. Personally, what I have adopted, I've realized that I'm an F student, you know, in many things, but I employ an A student. You know, as an F student, I employ an A student in my restaurant business. I employ an A student when it comes to my bookkeeping. So definitely, Adi, we need an expert. We need people like you to rally behind us and assist us when it comes to taxation. You know,
Charles, I agree with you. It is so important because we've seen so many situations where affairs haven't been done correctly or haven't been done at all. And what then happens is that there are so many penalties and punitive measures that are imposed, which
talking
can
about the
kill a
penalties.
business.
Talking about the penalties, you miss your your tax return by a day or your VAT return by a day.
1 day penalty.
How much is it? 10% now?
10% of the amount payable plus interest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is not deductible off your income, off your profits. So you have to pay the money, and you can't deduct it either.
To put it in a simple way, it's just like a person who's driving a car with worn-out tires. You meet the traffic cop on the way.
Absolutely.
It gives you a traffic fine for worn-out tires. You have to pay the traffic fine, and you still have to buy tires anyway.
Correct, and you run the risk of having an accident when one of the tires bursts. No, definitely. So no, it's important, especially these days in South Africa, to have somebody on your side who's looking after your affairs, but more importantly, ensuring correct and timely submission of all the necessary returns, because there really are a lot.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
I've done businesses in many countries. Sometimes I'll drive to Botswana to do business and come back home.
Yeah.
And I've realized that most people who stay right at the border inside Botswana, they cross the border to South Africa to fill up their tanks with fuel. Once they have got fuel in Botswana, they service their cars in South Africa. And as they service their cars in South Africa, simply because they're not South African citizens, I understand they don't pay tax.
VAT.
VAT, yes, they don't pay VAT.
Yeah.
But when they cross the border, they don't tell the Botswana border that they were here to service their cars. What do you say and what do you make out of that?
I'm not quite sure about that situation. It sounds a little bit naughty.
Yeah, it's very good. No, I've seen that many times. I've been all over the world.
Yes, you've seen it often.
I've seen these things happening,
As a foreigner in South Africa, one can get your VAT repaid back to you on goods or services supplied, and I'm assuming that's why they are doing that, to then benefit from that 14% VAT benefit.
And some of the South Africans, in fact, when they go overseas, they go overseas to purchase some stuff.
Yeah.
And before they come back home, right at the border, they claim they are VAT back.
Correct. Yeah.
Because they are not citizens of that country.
That is correct, yeah.
But when they come here in South Africa, when they land, aren't they supposed to pay the South African VAT as South African citizens?
Yes. You must declare all your imports, and that is essentially an import into the country. There are certain limits for what is known as personal goods and services, relatively small values. But on the whole, people do not declare the goods and services that they bring into this country, and they should actually pay the output VAT on that.
And if we don't declare, it can't be right.
No, absolutely not. No.
It can't be right.
No. Because one runs the risk of being stopped.
Yeah.
And then it's punitive damages.
Well, viewers, that's the time that we had with my guest, Addrian. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. But briefly, Addrian,
yes.
If people need your services, where and how can they get hold of you?
Thank you, Charles. What I would do is I'd recommend them to give the office a call on 012 6640300 or email info@avas, that's avass.co.za, or our website, www.avacc.co.za.
Thank you, viewers out there. You have been watching Marketplace with me, Charles. We'll continue with this topic next week again. If you want to get hold of me, I'm available on www.charlesngobeni.com or on my Facebook, Charles Ngobeni, or you may want to contact me on Instagram, Charles_Ngobeni. Ciao.